Let's move now from the outer circle to the inner circle. How do you relate with those in the inner circle? This would be your other coaches. This would be support personnel, certainly the players. What's your relations with the coaching staff and the support personnel? What's your relationship with the players? Let me read some quotes of my mentor, Frosty Westering. We've talked about him. It'll just give you a frame of reference for where we're coming from. I love the way he said it. One of his comments was, I don't coach for a living. I don't coach for a living. I coach for a lovin'. Meaning, this goes back to that theme we talked about. Love the game. Love God, love people, love the game, love the sport, whatever you want to call it. This is very, very important. You may think it's not important, and if it is important to you, it's not important, but it's important to us because it's very difficult to play, practice, prepare, commit to something that you don't love at the highest level. If you're going to give your whole heart, a clear mind, strong will, and great passion, and you kind of don't really like something, that's not going to go well in terms of outcomes of reaching that goal. And so we coach for a lovin', not for a living. Or we lead a business for a lovin', not for a living. If you just want a paycheck, that's different than if you're energized by your job, right? And the motivation should be that I'm here, whatever the job is, even if it's something that's viewed as a menial job, I'm there. Again, this is work as worship. We've talked about sport as worship. This is work as worship. When I go to that fast food restaurant and I work at minimum wage, I am worshiping God. People are going to see Jesus by the way I handle the process. If I act like it's just a job, it's going to be hard for you to glorify God in the way you do the job. Again, this carryover of this philosophy is in all areas. They may only play in your youth sport team 1 year, but there they can learn depending on how deeply you commit to communicating and how deeply they buy in. They can come away with lessons that will translate into life, frankly, will translate into their benefit. Because if a guy can learn to be a great worker at a minimum wage job of labor, and he learns the principles of it, then as he moves up the food chain, he's going to end up in greater positions of authority, responsibility, leadership, and then income, frankly. And there's a correlation that's very significant, not direct, but very significant in the best interest of those kids that you're working with, if you're a leader, if you're a coach, and very important for you as a player. Because even if you're a young kid, based on how you approach the sport, other people are going to be motivated or demotivated, depending on, it's going to smoke them out. When somebody's working very hard and very committed, other people that aren't stick out like a sore thumb. And so we're trying to create this kind of culture, and Frosty articulated it through a coach filter. Here's another thing he said in terms of hiring. So, in discipleship, the first chapter in the handbook, in the master plan of evangelism is selection. And Jesus spent all night in prayer before he picked the 12. It didn't matter what he did with the 12 if he picked poorly and they weren't what we call fat seed. If those disciples, though they were unschooled and ordinary men, weren't faithful to God and the mission, if they didn't make some of themselves available, they left everything to follow him. If they weren't teachable, if they were arrogant and wanted to pick and choose what Jesus said, that would have been problematic. And if they weren't courageous to obey when there was risk, they all lost their lives in a violent way, or at least 11 of the 12 of the primary ones did, the initial disciples. So this is an example of the kind of player and the kind of coach. That's our vetting mechanism. That's our terminology for who we want in our program. Certainly who we want as a staff or those we hire in our organization, what it might be. Again, this doesn't mean coach. This could be own a business. You own a business. Who are the people you hire? What are you thinking about? So Frosty's comment about that with a new hire, in particular in a sport-related circle, is he was less concerned with their competency than he was with their heart. Because his point was this. He's looking through a coaching filter. He says, I can teach you how to coach, but I can't teach you how to love if you don't. So if you don't love the players, we've lost the mission, which is eternity. The mission and the vision is tied with the target was eternity. And if you're not willing to die to yourself to love your players, then they're not going to get a picture of the Father's love for us, which translates into us being compelled to die to ourselves to serve our teammates and the coaching staff and the greater good instead of our personal good. And this is all what we think about in hiring or aligning with other people in leadership. I love that. I care less about how well you coach than I care about how you love. I care how you coach, but I care less about that than I care about how you love. I can teach you how to coach, but I can't teach you how to love if you don't. And this is part of the process of what we're looking for. When we recruit, sometimes you inherit teams, sometimes you get to choose and pick at some level. And this is a big deal. But in either case, you got to make sure you educate, because even if you inherit your team, your youth sport team or whatever, even if you inherit it, the bottom line is it's still a voluntary organization, and you set the bar, the thermostat, the theme about how we do business here. This is how we're going to treat each other. Here's how we're going to treat coaches. Here's how we're going to treat the scoreboard. Here's how we're going to treat the opponent. Here's how we're going to treat the officials. Here's how we're going to treat the fans. All this stuff, they voluntarily choose to be part of your organization. Whether you inherited the players or whether you pick them, the bottom line is they can make a decision about continuing in that organization. And so it's critical that they believe in you, that they believe in the staff. You better make sure the staff's on the same page. If the staff's not on the same page, then they're going to communicate something different or separate than what you're communicating. And if there's a tension, if there's dissonance, for sure if there's opposite convictions about whatever the vision and mission is, it's going to be problematic. It's no different than parents. The children know when the parents are at odds. The children know when they're in a conflict. The children know when they don't agree with each other. My young 6-year-old has no problem knowing that when she goes to me, if I say no, she's going to go to mom. And if mom says yes and I say no, she's not only picked a fight in the marriage, she's created some tension and dissonance. All she wants to know is get her way, right? We have to be on the same page. If we're not on the same page, you got compromised direction. And we already are facing our own flesh and selfishness, let alone the powers of the culture, let alone the demonic forces that are attempting to disable the mission. Again, glorifying God is the mission and vision. Even in a secular campus, I'm coaching in such a way that I glorify God and we glorify God, even if they don't care about God. We're still going to play and live and compete a certain way. It's going to be biblical. Whether we can call it that or not, it's going to be biblical in orientation. We beat that issue like a dead horse, so we'll not visit that again. They've got to believe in the vision and the mission. And if they don't, we want to graciously allow them out. And if they say they do and they don't, that'll smoke out. And at every juncture, you got to decide how ferociously you deal with dissonance or a lack of commitment from those in the inner circle, right? The outer circle, the ones we do care about are those that we're serving. So if I'm in an institution, I do have to care about what the athletic director or the athletic director of the youth program thinks. And he's going to hire me based on something, and he's going to have accepted what the vision and mission was, God willing. And if at some point he resists that, then you have to make a decision about whether you can continue to work in that organization if they have shifting goals based on all kinds of factors you can't control. The players need to believe in each other. The coaches need to believe in each other. There has to be trust. There has to be caring and sharing. You don't wait for this to happen. You have to develop it, and you have to have an intentional, strategic plan to develop it. And these things to us are more critical than X's and O's, because if you're competent in X and O's and incompetent in terms of the relational aspect, then you're going to hinder the chance of reaching your ultimate goal, which does not have to do with the scoreboard, even though you are attempting to be competent on the scoreboard. We talked about that in the previous class. And there needs to be time spent together so you can build relationships. It's hard to build relationships if you're never together. And we work at that. We cross-pollinate. That means we work at cross-pollinating people that naturally aren't inclined to each other. We cross-pollinate races. We put different colors, skins together who don't naturally work in the opposite direction. When I go into a college as a consultant and I'm looking at the athletic team, if the players are separate of the student body, that's a yellow flag. If the players are only meeting by their position groups and not with each other, that's a problem. If the races are together, that's a problem. If the people that are older in the program are not with those that are younger with the program, that's a problem. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a problem because unless we can cross-pollinate and build synergy, supernatural synergy, where people lay down their rights and take responsibility, where the goal is the greater good, eternity for those who confess His name, unity for those who confess his name and those who don't confess his name. We have to work at that. Again, what was the point of this conversation? How do you flip a program? If you flip a program and have dissonance at any level, even one person in that boat of 10 or 100, you're going to compromise the situation. That doesn't mean everybody's going to always be on the same page, but you've got to aim for perfection and be ferocious about the process to hit that target. Or your little 7-year-old soccer team is not going to have an enhanced experience. It won't glorify God, which is the goal, so some of those kids can have an opportunity to see Jesus and choose him. Again, evangelism, discipleship, the target eternity, the glory of God, evangelism, saving the lost, discipleship, working with the saved, is all part of this, even at a secular school or in a program where anybody can play and they're 7 years old. This is what we believe philosophically.